again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Three of the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
I have nothing funny to say today. It's not funny most of the time. It's fine.
Come on. I was looking forward to that
I didn't-
this time.
I didn't have anything at all.
I was
Not
waiting for it.
prepared for that. I know. I heard the pause and I was like, "Oh, he's too nice."
Yeah,
But
I left
I don't
my
have
mic
anything right
muted and everything, waiting for it. But yeah, Dave
Okay.
immediately into the chat saying he heard there was going to be nipples tonight. Looks like my plan worked. You came, so I got you here. Got at least one person in here. Got ya. All right.
You fell for our most devious trap.
But hey guys, we're back. Not a lot of Ducks news other than who'd they sign today? Was
I think it's like Opasov.
yeah, Stanislav Chistov. No, why can't I remember? It doesn't matter. They signed some Russian guy to a professional tryout. That's not what we're.
Some fucking Russian.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah,
who we're here to talk about today, or what we're here to talk about. We've got a lot of NHL stuff that we've missed, and we've been trying to hop on the show and talk about it, and today just happens to be that day. So we're going to dive into a lot of the big news around the NHL. Don't have really any set plan of what we're going to cover, other than we know we're going to talk a bit about Huberdeau and a few other things. And then I guess the big Ducks news we have is Mason McTavish just absolutely balling out for Team Canada tonight in the rescheduled World Junior Championships. Canada won 11-1 against Slovakia, and McTavish tied the Canadian record.
The score finished at 11-1.
Yeah, 11-1. Yeah.
Oh my god!
They let up the gas a little bit when it was 8-1, 8-0 after 8-1 or 8-0. I think 8-1 after 2. And then they scored 3, and they left 2 of those goals very late in the game.
My god.
Yeah.
Because I was driving home for the third, so I didn't see any of that.
Yeah, McTavish came out early and scored his 4th, and then I think from there they just kind of held up a little bit because they probably could have made it 14-15. It was going that way. It was trending in that direction, but
yeah. I mean, I said this on Twitter, but like I was actually like really impressed with McTavish after he scored the breakaway goal. I think it was. Everybody like skates over him, and you can see him just kind of like calm everybody down and just kind of keep everybody's heads. And it's like it wasn't disrespectful in any kind of like, we're trying to like protect the. It's just like we're fine. Like we don't, you know what I mean? We're doing a good job. Blah blah blah. And it was just it was good. I liked it. I like to see that little bit of kind of leadership, and
he's a captain,
he was given the captaincy, right? And to see him like really kind of have those kind of moments of being a captain was nice. You can just leave now, Dave.
It only took 2.5 minutes for them to acknowledge the shades. So, for anybody listening on the audio version, Steven is wearing sunglasses for this version of the podcast, which is why you should always visit and watch the video version of the show.
Yeah.
You miss these subtle details like Steven wearing sunglasses. I know it has no impact on your listening of the show, but yeah,
it's
that's
a visual medium.
the tidbits that somebody said you must be high. Welcome to every show. So. Oh,
I don't know.
But
They were on my dining room table.
If I had shades near me, I would join you, but I don't have any. Don't have my shades inside.
You live in Canada. There's no sun in Canada.
No. I sent a. It's funny. I had to send a picture to my boss today, and it was from the winter. So I sent it to him, and he's like, "Is this what it looks like in your city right now?" I'm like, dude, no, it's August. Come on. But yes, the typical Canada memes that it's snowing and no sun all year round.
You know what? At least you never have to deal with Joakim Noah just completely athering the city when he was with Chicago and he was just like, oh, it's so nice, it's not snowing or whatever, and then the reporters like tell him it's actually been snowing for like the whole day because he's been in the like stadium, and he's crushed. It is so funny. He gets so excited that it's not snowing, and then they tell him it, and he's just like, this fucking sucks. Dude, it's one of the funniest things in the world.
This is perfect topic because I forgot about this and I just remembered it mentioning this today. So there was a like Young Money reunion, right? Drake, Lil Wayne, Nicki Minaj in Toronto. And Lil Wayne, this is like his first time in Canada in a very long time. Somebody interviewed him and they said, so what's it like being back in Canada? And he's like, so whatever he was there last time, like it was probably dead of winter. So he's like, yeah, last time I came it was really cold. And this time it wasn't that cold, so that was nice. All the comments are like, Lil Wayne just finally like learned about summer, about seasons. Like, dude, you came in the middle of summer. Like, yeah, of course it's not gonna be cold. Just wild behavior. I love it though. And it showed how much pull Drake has at the border here in Canada, which is not maybe unsettling a little bit. That apparently
it should be a national embarrassment.
Yeah, Lil Wayne is in like a gun charge investigation or whatever, so he got held up at the border, and I guess Drake pulled some strings and got him across or something.
Absolutely fucking ridiculous.
I'm glad to know that's how it works. So great.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is why you guys aren't here to listen to this shit. Mason McTavish balled out today. 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points for Canada. At one point, when he had 5 points, the next highest scorer on the team had 2. So he was just unbelievable today. Plus minus whatever you want to say. I mentioned this before the show. He was a +7 to next highest, other than Olin Zellweger was a +4. So Zellweger and McTavish both +7 on the night. McTavish also had 8 shots, which led the team. So like, just if you watch the game too, like it was just like a joke of a dominant performance. Like clearly the best player on the ice, and again we were talking a bit before the show, like it looks like you took some, you plucked a guy out of the NHL and said, hey, you're gonna go play in this it's like the NBA Pro-Am tournaments we've seen going on, right, where you see some guy just absolutely ball out and a guy who works at, like, has to get up at 8, go to a 9 a.m. shift tomorrow.
McTavish is in the Drew League.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like they just pulled him out to play against a bunch of amateurs, and he just like did his thing casually, like not really trying, and dropped 80 points on some guy who's got to bag groceries in the morning. Like it's just, it was unreal, man. Like anybody had any questions about this guy playing in the NHL next year, I think when you look, I mean, obviously all year, but the first couple games in the World Juniors back when it was supposed to be played, then the Olympic Games, then his season in the OHL, the Memorial Cup, and then now this a couple months out from the season. Like there's no doubt in my mind this guy plays a lot of games, the majority of the season with the Ducks, if not the entire season. Like there's nowhere else for him to go other than the NHL.
Yeah, I think the quote that's kind of been sticking with me when I've been trying to think about the timeline and the prospects and where kind of everybody is at and what Verbeek is kind of looking for. One of the things that he said, I believe it was before the draft, I think it was more just towards the end of the season, where he just said he wants guys to dominate in the level that they're at before they move up, right? He wants them to look like they clearly need to be challenged. And I think tonight you kind of got an idea that maybe that's exactly where McTavish is. That at this point, his skill level is high enough and his physical development is like advanced enough that at this point it just comes up to where he's at between the ears.
Yeah.
And whether he's, I don't know, like mature enough or ready or whatever, right? Because he's 18, 19.
Yeah.
He's still pretty young. Like, he's still really young. So to me, it definitely feels like that's kind of where it is at this point, is that if he gets sent down, it will be 20 games in at least, probably, right? Because like he would have to have an extended run of play of really not looking able to pull it off for them to send him back down. And I think Stevens mentioned this, I think, in the second half of his mailbag, that it's very likely they start him at the wing. And if they do that, then that takes a lot of the defensive responsibility away, which is going to make it even easier for him to look like he did in the 9 games we saw of him last year, where he was just a bowling ball.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm interested to see. It's been a while since I've seen him play on the wing, really, since that stint in Anaheim. I wonder if that will do him well. I would imagine, like like you said, it'll take a lot of the responsibility off him right off the bat to just go out there and play the way he wants to play. But again, you take with a grain of salt to play at junior. You can't really say that will project to the NHL level. But like, that's just how dominant he's been as centerman over the entire year. It's unbelievable. So I could see it where it's might be a similar thing to Zegras, but we don't get to see that transition happen where he goes back down to the AHL, where he starts the year on the wing and then shifts over to center as the season goes on. As maybe there's some injuries, they give him a couple reps there to see how he does. But man, like I'm getting excited. It's so different to Zegras and the hype around him coming up, where again, like there was a lot of hype for a good reason around Trevor Zegras. The World Junior MVP run that he had was just exceptional to watch. But when you watch what McTavish is doing, like McTavish putting up 6 points in the way he did it in this game versus Zegras putting up, the same amount of points in a game and the way he does it, it's polar opposites of the way they go about it and do their business. But both are fun to watch for different reasons, right? And it was so casual from Mason tonight, the way he went about his business. And I hope he sticks the whole season with the Ducks, because this is...
I think he will.
Yeah,
I
man,
think
it's starting to look...
He looks too solid. I mean, at this point, like, it almost feels like it makes the most sense to just make him the left wing top line, or the top line left wing with Zegras and Terry.
Yeah.
Like, that to me almost makes the most sense. If he's really if you really think he's ready, and I have no reason to think he's not. Like, everything that you see from him, you're like, yeah, no, he's certainly ready to play an NHL season. I mean, I think that would add a significant dynamic to that line that is just completely lacking. Like, Zegras and Terry are certainly not afraid to drive into the middle of the ice and go into the net and stuff like that, but they're not built the same way. McTavish is a huge kid.
Yeah.
And him to have that shot with two natural playmakers like those two, I just think the opportunity is there for that to be a pretty special combination. And, I think it kind of comes down to where does Lundestrom play?
Yeah.
Because if Lundestrom's your fourth liner, then, okay, you can play McTavish at center, and you can play him with Henrique and, I don't know, anybody else.
Yeah.
Strome,
Vetrano, right?
Right. Yeah, well, because in my head, I figure Zegras is first-line center, Strome is second-line center,
okay,
and then the bottom two are the questions, right? I think Strome and Vetrano together makes a lot of sense, especially for two new guys in a new situation. They did play together a little bit at the end of last year, and were on the same team at the very least.
Yep.
And I think just to start at the very least, you should probably just run Zegras and Terry out there together.
Yeah, especially Milano, right? Like the guy he played with the most outside of Milano was Terry, so it makes sense to put them together at the start of the year.
Yeah, and I think especially when you look at the additions that Verbeek has made, right? Like it just makes a lot of sense. And so it's like, what do you do with Lundestrom? What do you do with Henrique?
What do you do with Comtois, right? Where does he play?
Right. He's a guy that you could very easily see on that second line with Vetrano and Strome, kind of providing that a similar dynamic to what we were talking about with McTavish, where he's just going to be around the net. He's going to be a big body. Those other two are going to be, running around doing their thing, and he's going to be there to kind of pick everything up. You've got Strome who's making passes, Vetrano's taking shots, things like that. And, that would make a lot of sense. So then, do you do Henrique, Lundestrom, Silverberg, Carrick kind of a thing? Like, do you bring Aston Reese back and maybe put him there? Like, is that right? Do you have to go out and get another right winger to put on that side? Do you move Max Jones to his weak side? You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff, I think, is fundamentally what the conversation is, because if Lundestrom has to be your third line center, just kind of where the relationship is at with the organization, I don't see why you wouldn't play McTavish with Zegras and Terry.
Yeah. No, it makes
I don't
sense.
think there's a better option.
At least started that way, given the best chance to succeed right off the bat, and I think he fits really well on that line. Again, being maybe the main shooter on that line, not having to give that responsibility to Troy Terry, and having the weapon of a shot that Mason McTavish does. Like if you go back and you watch the goals he scored today, not the backhand, but the forehand shots that he took to the regular kind of wrist shots and snap shots, it's not a guy who just winds up with a really powerful and accurate wrist shot from the circle and they're like, wow, that was a great shot. It was just like perfectly taking your time, picking a spot and nailing it, right? Taking advantage of
It's almost a heavy snapshot.
Yeah, and just taking advantage of like a goalie who's not at the same skill level that you're at, right? Like waiting, taking the shot. He could have deked. He could have made a move. He could have embarrassed him. He found his location, waited, took advantage of it because he's got it. Like it's just again calm, casual, whatever you want to call it. Like it's a weird kind of skill set to watch. Like again, like I said, it's just you put out a tweet like watching somebody's dad out there. Like it's like watching some guy who's been around for 20 years just go against a bunch of kids, and he's well above the competition in terms of his skill level and his mindset. And
it's like if you took an AHLer to a beer league game, he would look like Wayne Gretzky. That's what it looked like. Like it was just ridiculous. I think the other thing that you were talking about as far as like he can make a deke, he can make a pass, is like nothing on a lot of those snapshots, nothing about his body language gave anything away. Like when he beat the goalie on that wrist shot through the legs, he was almost just straight standing up on that skate in.
Yeah.
And he just waited, like you said, and just beat him right between the legs, didn't he? Like he just beat him like high five hole.
Yep.
And it was just immediate. And you were just like, yeah, okay. It's just
it's such a clean beat. You watch it, it's like, man,
it's
wow.
just there's nothing about it that's telegraphed.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part of it that makes it special. At least within this context, right? Because again, you don't want to get too overexcited and project him as this exact player in the NHL. But the reason that it stood out in this game is because he wasn't in a position where he was telegraphing his snapshot. There was nothing about it that was like, oh, he's definitely going to shoot right now.
Yep.
And, especially for a guy who is known for having a good shot, like, I think that's pretty great.
Yeah. You couple that with eventually at the NHL level, him having the hands to make the move. We saw him walk into the slot and pull the backhand off and score one of, I think it was his second goal of the game with that as well. So, like, to have not only that shot as you're in your arsenal, to be able to make the move and have as many ways to score as he does, it projects well. And, man, it's just going to be exciting. I'm really excited for the season to watch him. And, there's a question in our chat a couple of minutes ago from Okamara about Zellweger. Is he with the Ducks this season, even if it's just for a few games? And we've talked about it a little bit. He's a guy I think could get a look if they don't add another defenseman, and he's looked really great in the two games, including tonight's game. He had a goal and an assist, and you, again, tweeted it, I think, or mentioned it to me in our interview with Scott Wheeler when he broke down Zellweger's game and said how there's nothing flashy about it. He doesn't go trying to deke out of his shorts or make anybody look silly. There's just this calm, reserved ability to him where he makes the right play at the right time and it works out for him. And the points just come with it. And like you look at his goal where picks the puck up, nice little burst of speed, fires it on net, it goes in. Yeah, I think I don't know if this was pre-tournament or the first game where he had like a laser from the point where he just was kind of walking the blue line, waited, and then fired it at the right time and cleaned through traffic, beat the goaltender.
I think that was I think he had. No, that was this game because the last one he had a deflection, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe the other way around.
Oh no, yeah, so it was the deflection, the shot to McTavish that deflected.
Yeah.
That McTavish deflected in, where it's just again perfect poise at the blue line. His assist in this game fakes the pass into the slot, beats the defender with his speed, and then throws a puck on net that eventually falls to, I think it was Joshua Waugh who ended up scoring. But again, like easily, like there's a lot of good defenders on this team. He looks like the best. And he's a lot younger than most of the players on this team. He's a lot smaller than most of the defenders on this team. Did not look out of place You know, again, we talked with Scott about that the size potentially being an issue, and the way Zellweger plays, it just doesn't. And when you watch him, even in games against, it's like just Slovakia is a pretty big team. They got some big players over there. They had to play kind of a physical grinding style because they aren't at the same skill level that Canada is, and rarely caught out of position on the ice. Every time he was on the ice, good things happen. Makes plays, makes smart plays, and he's just not the flashy defender, but the points just follow him around because he's so much smarter and quicker than everybody out there that every pass he makes is usually the correct decision and it leads to a good chance.
Yeah, it's kind of, exactly that thing where it's like he just makes the right decisions at the right times in a way that his game, unless like there's nothing like flashy, like you said about it. He just plays a really simple kind of game that's based on, being able to think the game at a higher level than everybody and to skate at a higher level than everybody. Because, like we were talking about with Scott, like you said, one of the things he said is it's a lot of like give and go type stuff. And that makes sense because that's just him reading the play, looking ahead, seeing it's there, and going, right? You saw the same thing tonight with Bedard and McTavish, where Bedard just kind of slid into a space. McTavish was able to pick it up. Bedard drove to the left side of the net, and he threw it there, and Bedard just, finished it. And the thing with Zellweger is exactly that. It's very simple. And because it's kind of predicated on him thinking the game at a high level, there is kind of a unspectacular nature to it. And I think that's kind of an incredibly encouraging sign, especially, like we talked about with a smaller defenseman at that level. Usually, when you have those like incredibly like dynamic defensemen, you're looking at guys that are kind of doing the Makar thing where they're leading the break and they're taking it in all the way on their own, and they're not, kind of dictating play with the puck on their stick as opposed to just kind of dictating play with their positioning.
Yeah.
And I think I think he's probably going to get 6-7 games at least. I think he's a long shot to finish his season at the NHL. I still think he's a long shot, but I don't know that I would be completely caught off guard.
Yeah. Now, make what you will of this stat. Again, we've mentioned it before. Plus minus is what it is. The leaders right now in the World Juniors, Olen Zellweger is a +9 in 2 games, +7 tonight. McTavish is a +8, was a +7 tonight. Connor Bedard is third at +5, so Zellweger is 4 above him, and McTavish is 3 above him. The next 3 players are from Finland, Huberdeau, Ratti, and Kemmel, and Puutio, who are both +5 and +4. And then
Wait, Ronnie Huberdeau?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
And then the Canadians are after that, where it is Joshua Waugh, who's a +4, Will Cooley, William Dufour, +3, and that's it. The rest of the guys are +2 or +1. So they're just exceptionally above everybody else. They're on the ice, good things happen. And then, Mason McTavish leads the tournament with 8 points in 2 games. Joakim Kemmel is next with 5. Ratti has 5, and Joshua Waugh have 5. McTavish has 4 goals, lead everybody as well. And Zellweger is tied with fellow teammate Lucas Cormier for the most points by a defenseman so far. Again, it's only been 2 games, but he has 3 points, and I think it's 2 goals for him in the where am I missing it? Yeah, 2 goals and an assist in the 2 games so far. So, I mean, listen, if you're a Ducks fan right now, the 2 top players in the tournament for forward and defenseman right now are both prospects. And I think there's a good chance that when all's said and done at this tournament, you could walk away with Mason McTavish being the MVP and Olen Zellweger being the best defenseman of the tournament. There's a lot of good young defensemen at this tournament, but Zellweger definitely has a shot to be in the mix. I think there's a better chance that McTavish wins MVP than Zellweger winning best defenseman, but I would say he'll be right kind of up there, right, in that conversation. But the one thing I tweeted out, and it is something to get excited about, is there's never been a team that has 2 players who've won back-to-back World Juniors MVPs. And the Ducks have the best chance ever, really, of doing it, with Zegras winning it technically last year, because this is last year's tournament, but now rescheduled to now. And McTavish having the best shot, and right now a 3-point lead on anybody else to really go out there and do it. So it would be a lot of fun. There's been a lot of high-profile names who've turned out as World Juniors MVPs. John Gibson is one of them from back, I think, in 2013. But never has a team had back-to-back prospects win World Junior MVP, and this is the best chance I think of any of them.
Yeah, no, it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, I think it also really creates a very fun kind of narrative heading into camp, right? About Zegras and McTavish competing against each other, right? There's still talk about Zegras, maybe being a winger at the NHL level. And, I've heard more than a few people say, and not just inside of Anaheim, but people outside of Anaheim, that they could absolutely see a world where Mason McTavish is the number one center.
Yeah.
I think Scott even may have said that to us.
Yeah, he said there's a better chance that I think McTavish is a center at the NHL level right now than Trevor Zegras in long term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, so it just creates like a really kind of fun competition, and it should be interesting to see the way it develops. And I mean, if you're an Anaheim fan right now, I think everything you're kind of seeing and hearing is just giving you reasons to be optimistic that, while the last few years have sucked, we've definitely seemed to make the most of it, right? Drysdale looks like he's going to be a top 4 defenseman.
Yeah. At
the very least. Zegras looks like he's a top 6 center. Mason McTavish looks like he should be a top 6 center. Like, I just think there's a lot. You got Olin Zellweger, who was a 2nd-round pick. You've got Sasha Pastujov, who was a 3rd-round pick. Like, there are players in the pipeline and already kind of joining the team that look to be of a caliber that is why people tank. And Anaheim wasn't explicitly tanking. Like last year, they were just like, yeah, we're bad. And I think you could maybe argue the year before that, which I think would have been Aiken's first year. They were not great, but they've really come out of those, that downstretch with meaningful players who look like they will be meaningful players for a long time and be a big part of this team's ability to contend.
Yeah, it's going to be. I'm really interested to see how it goes this year. With the young guys on the way, guys who could challenge for roster spots, available spots up for grabs with McTavish and with Zellweger. But then you've got guys like Perreault and Tracy in the minors as well, Pastujov, like you mentioned, of guys that are on the way. So we've talked endlessly about the Ducks having kind of these pieces that look like they're at least going to be NHL players. And, I mean, the guys they drafted this year, and Gauthier and Luneau and Warren, they all kind of look like they're going to be guys who are going to play in the NHL at some point. But now you've got some of these guys, McTavish at 3rd overall. He's been exceptional. I don't think anybody expected this of him, but for a guy you draft at 3rd overall, this is what you hope for, to be a superstar,
exactly
right? And now he's developing into that. But then you get a guy like Zellweger, who was just impressed and gotten better by leaps and bounds, that he could be a superstar taken in the 2nd round.
He was another one who had a really good World Juniors, right? That's where was it Solomon was familiar with him? They worked together for the World Juniors
before his draft. Yeah, he'd go to U18. Still like the World Hockey Challenge, but it's the U18 equivalent of the World Juniors. He had a good tournament leading up to that, and a handful of games in the WHL's COVID-shortened season where he was playing at a point per game. And then just also was one of the youngest players going into that draft, and the Ducks took a flyer on him because a lot of teams passed on him because of the height and not seeing a full season of him and not wanting to buy in on one tournament of success as it being what is gonna come from him in the future. And he's proved everybody wrong. He's on the top. Like you heard Scott talk about him and say that he's one of his favorite prospects right now, and you've got a lot of people who are coming out saying, man, there's a lot of teams that are going to wish they took this kid a lot earlier. If he was one day, I think, of being eligible for this past draft, and with his performance from this year, if he was eligible for that draft, he still would have been a first-round pick, a high first-round pick in this year's draft. Like,
if he had the year he had, he goes before Korchinski, right?
Yeah, I would imagine. Like,
maybe not, because Korchinski's like 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah, and Zellweger would, in this year's draft, if he was eligible, would be one of the older players. But he would still, I would imagine, be a guy
you would
who is
go
a top
Nemec,
5-6
Jiricek.
defenseman. Like he's I think he's right after Nemec, Jiricek, Mintyukov, and Kuczynski, right? I'm trying to remember who the other defenseman that ended up going, but I would still think
is it Mikheyev?
Matachuk.
Matachuk, yeah.
So
I knew it was.
I think you could
I think you could argue him over Mintyukov.
Yeah. I think you could argue him over Mintyukov or Matachuk. I think he'd be in that conversation. If he doesn't go in front of those guys, he goes right after those guys. And the only downside, again, is that he's 5'9", and that he would be older than those guys. But it's
I could honestly see a situation where it's kind of similar to what happened with Sanderson and Drysdale, where Sanderson went and Drysdale was the next one, right? Mm-hmm. And it was just, that's what it is. And, especially kind of the comparables really work with Korchinski being a great skater and having that kind of height, and then Jamie Drysdale just being like an offensive defenseman with size issues, but great skating and all this kind of stuff. It almost works a little too perfect, but I think you could definitely see a situation where the moment Korchinski goes, Zellweger goes next.
Yeah.
And at worst, he goes 2 down, right? If somebody jumps on Mintyukov, I don't think people are going to be particularly patient at that point if they think he's the guy that he looks like he is.
Yeah. No, it
would be a very different draft, I think, in a lot of ways this year. If a couple of those, obviously you can say that every fucking year, if a couple of guys from the year before, the year after are in this one.
Yeah.
But I just think it's because it is so close, like you said, with the dates, it really stands out because of how unheralded he was and kind of the reaction by some of the scouting people and prospect writers about him falling into day 2. And then with the year that he's had, it certainly seems like he would have been a top 15 pick, almost a guaranteed top 15 pick.
It makes this year's draft feel a little bit better that they stayed safer in a sense, because you look at that draft now and you come out of the first 3 picks with McTavish, Zellweger, and Pastuov. And, Pastuov still has a little bit of ways to go, but he had a great rookie season in the OHL. But even just with those first 2, and McTavish and Zellweger, to walk out with them where they could potentially be top 10 players from that draft. And like we said, McTavish drafting him at 3, that's what you hope for there. But then to also add Zellweger to that mix and potentially Pastuov as being a guy who could be a top 20, 30 player from that draft, and you got him in the 3rd round. It looks pretty nice, and you would hope that the next guy they get is the guy who's playing with Mason McTavish at the World Juniors right now on his line, and Connor Bedard, because we briefly touched on him a bit, but man, he looks good. And you have to sit back and remember that this guy is still like a full year or 2 younger than some of these guys too. And when he was playing back in the winter, when this tournament originally was listed, he was still 16, and he was balling out in that. He had a 4-goal game. We're talking about McTavish.
He's not a slouch.
Tying the Canadian record with guys like Comtois and Lemieux for 4-goal games for the most goals in a game in the World Junior history. Well, yeah, Bedard did that back 7 months ago when he was 16 years old in this tournament, and he's looked really, really good too. Not McTavish has stood out on another level because of just his dominance, his size, his skill, and everything. But man, it looks tough. And somebody made a comment of this on Twitter that the Ducks would ever be in a position to get Connor Bedard. I think it was you who made the point though. Like, you just gotta be in the lottery. You got a chance at him as long as you have a lottery pick.
This is the thing I was thinking about, kind of was it the year that they got Lafreniere, they finished 13th or something overall? They had a major jump. Or maybe it was the year...
The Rangers jumped up to get Kakko, and Flyers jumped up to get Patrick. They jumped up a while. I think the Jersey
jumped up, right, to get Hughes?
Yeah, and the Stars jumped up 12 spots to get Heiskanen, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So there's
Okay.
been a
So
few of those, yeah.
I think, you kind of hope that the way that Verbeek has played it, this could sound silly, but that kind of you get a little bit of karma, right? Like you get a good bounce because he's very clearly, as everybody has pointed out, made decisions that takes them farther from first than they may have been before, right? I think even with the defensive liabilities that still exist on the blue line, I now think there is at least enough quality skating and firepower that you've got a chance to maybe stay in some games just by sheer just go. And if that's the case, and you end up finishing 11, 12, 13 instead of 3, 4, 5, yeah, your odds in the lottery drop significantly. But you kind of hope that you are almost rewarded for not completely tearing it down, right? And it's stupid because it's kind of moralizing something that's really dumb, but at the same time, it is nice to see Verbeek being, like we've talked about, very methodical, very patient. I don't think anything that he's done has felt rushed. I don't think anything he's done has felt forced. It just a lot of things that just seem to make sense, like we've said. And, maybe they finish 13th and they get a lucky bounce, and now all of a sudden Connor Bedard plus this core that you're looking at, or, even if they jump him into that 2-3, that Russian kid's supposed to be fucking incredible.
Yeah.
And he's not going to come over for a few years, but still, now you're maybe in a situation where you've got, McTavish on his second contract. You've got, Drysdale and Zegras and Terrier on their next contracts, and those are going to be serious. So maybe at that point, having, the Russian kid on an ELC for 3 years because he's not going to come over, is huge. Maybe it's a 1-year ELC or something. I think Kaprizov only signed a 1 or 2 year deal for his ELC or something like that. But I still think that the point stands that even if you get to second with a lucky bounce, the opportunity to drastically improve the quality of this roster is going to be there. And you didn't have to kind of embarrass yourself in a sense to do it. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It's just one of those things, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, too. Is anytime anybody ever hears us say, oh, we hope the Ducks get Bedard, or a joke, 2020, future 2023, 2024 Ducks roster player, whatever it is.
Right.
It's we're not saying the Ducks are going to be bad. I think with all the additions, we still think they're probably, borderline playoff team at best. Oh, that's all you need to do is if you miss the playoffs, you have a chance. You have the odds. Now you have to, with the new rule, you can only move up 10 spots, so you'd have to kind of finish as the 10th worst teams. But do we look at this roster and say that's impossible for the Ducks to be one of the 10 worst teams in the league? I know adding Klingberg and Strome and Vetrano make this team better, but you're offsetting the losses of Manson and Lindholm and Raquel,
Right.
and Silfverberg again if he's healthy or not.
Getzlaf.
So this team has done their best to replace those players, but even with those players, they were a bottom 5, bottom 10 team in the league, right? And defensively, they are still going to be, they're going to be worse next year defensively. They'll be better offensively, you would imagine, but defensively, they're going to be worse. So it's going to be a high-flying style of hockey. We don't even know if this team can play that yet because they really haven't ever had an opportunity to play that style. So I don't think we're not hoping the Ducks are going to be bad. It's more so a joke more than anything. But it would just be nice to see Bedard play for Anaheim.
They're in the problem for Anaheim, I think, more than anything, is going to be they're more than likely going to miss the playoffs simply because of the division they're in. They are better than Seattle, probably, and San Jose, probably, right? I think that's fair to say. I don't know that they're definitely not better than the Kings. They're not better than Calgary, most likely. With Uyghur and Huberdeau in the door, they still obviously have to have a spot to fill in the top 6, but that's still a team that should remain fairly competitive.
Yeah, and there's
You've
a
got
lot of teams that got
Edmonton.
better. Seattle got better too.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like it's almost guaranteed that they won't make the playoffs. The question is are they gonna beat up on a lot of the teams that they're kind of in a running with, right? And do they finish closer to 10th by point, or closer to the playoffs by points than they do to like fourth place because they won a lot of games either in overtime or regulation against bad teams, and maybe they sneak a couple of extra points, like loser points, from some of the good teams some nights. So, I think we should expect them to miss the playoffs for a number of reasons. But I also think there is a lot of things to say this team is probably not going to be as bad as it was last year.
Question then. Are they better heading into the beginning of this season, looking at the roster and how it's made up, saying we go in with the roster as is now, than they were when they went in to the start of the last season? Now, not saying the expectations, we didn't know what Zegras was going to do in his rookie year, but just the players as is now versus the players we had then. Do you think the Ducks are better?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Oh man,
it's tough because the sticking point for me is nobody expected to get what they got from Terry and Zegras in that season, right? And they popped off.
And Comtois did that the year before, and then really rough second year, which is a thing that we've seen consistently has happened. The sophomore slump is a thing that people talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just
so
there's something to be said for the emotion of your first season.
Take the assumptions of how they were going to do. Take them as the players they were last year.
Mm-hmm.
Going into the start of the season, Zegras is a potential 60-point player. Terry is a potential 60-point player.
They were not those guys, though. Correct, yeah.
No, but let's just say, the same roster on paper. If you had to take going into this season with that roster or going into this season with the roster they have now, which are you better off having? Going into this season as if everything had happened the way it happened. That's how I feel like that's the fairest way I can determine if they're better. Which roster would you rather have, or which roster do you think has a better chance of winning more games going into the start of this season? The roster they had at the start of last year or the roster that they have going into this year? I personally think it's splitting hairs. Because I think offensively and the way the roster is structured, I think they're better. I think up front, I think Strome and Vetrano are really nice pieces. I think Max Jones coming back is great. Maxime Comtois, we can hope he can do the thing. You know what you're going to get from Adam Henrique. So I think you've replaced Ricard Raquel, you've replaced Ryan Getzlaf, you've bringing some younger players back into the system. Defensively, I think that's the struggle for me. Is again offensively, you've gotten better on the blue line as well because you've brought in Klingberg. The thing that I can't account for the loss of is Lindholm and Manson and what that's going to do to that blue line and what they're going to look like defensively in front of John Gibson, because at the end of the day is going to be the issue.
I think for me, I the reason that I am struggling is I think the defense is definitively worse. But I think there are more guys that I would 75-80% expect to hit 40 points this year.
Yep.
That to me is the hard part.
Yeah. They'll definitely score more goals.
That's exactly right. Like, are they deep enough offensively now, with the understanding that they're not elite, but depth as far as where the goals should come from to offset the fact that they don't have a defenseman known for playing defense? Vakanainen is probably on the opening night roster. We don't even know it. Like, he was just bad last year. He was just flat bad. And the tools are there. I think there's every reason to be, optimistic about what he can turn into, but I don't think anybody's looking at him as a surefire answer to a top 4 spot. John Klingberg, again, provides a different dynamic from the blue line. He's a better player than Shattenkirk. He's a younger player than Shattenkirk. Like, that kind of stuff is obvious. I mean, I think this is going to sound really stupid. For where the teams were at heading into each season, I think they had the best roster they could. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I think the team as it was constructed last year was the correct choice for going into that year. You've got a couple of pending UFAs. You've got some names that maybe might need to get moved. You've got a couple of young players that you're given an opportunity to. This year, those young guys are stepping up. There's guys that should be in much bigger roles and should be expected to fill much bigger roles. You've brought in a couple veterans to kind of help make up for the loss of franchise pillar Ryan Getzlaf. Klingberg gives you another asset that you can look at, like we've talked about. If they don't make the playoffs, if they're not in that race, and if they don't feel that a long-term deal can be achieved, because we know that's what Klingberg is looking for, then you've got a guy that you can trade.
I think I think direction I'm trying to go with that question, are they better this year than with last year's roster or this year's roster, is looking at the teams that have gotten better, and if they are at the point where we think they are last year, on par with it. Last year we went in saying they're one of the worst teams in the Pacific Division. There's not many teams we could really consider other than Seattle as worse, and it turned out it was just really Seattle and San Jose that were worse teams. So I would say you look at the rest of the teams in those division. Edmonton has got better because they've addressed one of their major needs in goal with Jack Campbell. I think Vegas, going into the season healthy, they are better because they've got a healthy Jack Eichel. Now, you lost Pacioretty.
Because we're not 100% sure that they're healthy.
They are around the same. I think you could say they're slightly worse because they lost Pacioretty, but going in healthy, I think they're still a better team than the Ducks. I think Vancouver was better last year. I think they're going to be better, or if not the same, this year.
Oh my God, I completely forgot about Vancouver.
And they had, since Bruce came in, they were a lot better. I think they're going to be a better team over the entire course of the season. I think they're better constructed, at least at this point, of guys who are ready to contribute at an NHL level. I think Calgary's at least gotten on par, right? You've brought in Huberdeau, you brought in Uyghur. Yes, you lose Gaudreau and Tkachuk, but they still have a really solid, core there, and I don't think they're done. And then Seattle has gotten better, and LA has gotten better. So Seattle, are they better than Anaheim right now? Probably not, but they've narrowed the gap. The games will be tougher, adding Burakovsky and Bjorkstrand and Shane Wright and another season of Matty Beniers. So really, all you can say is San Jose is probably worse than Anaheim right now, and that's it. So they have to play against some very tough teams in the Pacific Division and win a lot of games against those teams that have gotten better than they were last year. And the Ducks couldn't beat those teams last year either. So that's where we're coming from. Not, yes, the Ducks look good and they've had a good offseason, but that's where I'm coming from when I say, I don't think they're a playoff team yet. I think that they could be worse or around the same as where they were last year, which puts them right in that conversation for Connor Bedard of being one of the 10 worst teams in the league. It doesn't, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to harp and say they're having a bad offseason or anything, because I think they've had a great offseason and they've done a good job replacing what they lost. They could have just sat still, added a bunch of dead weight, and really just tanked.
Just Arizona did, yeah,
season.
100%.
Yeah, and, so there are teams around the league. We're not saying they're one of the worst teams in the league, because Chicago's way worse. Arizona's way worse.
Honestly, like when we ended the season, and I was like, that was fun, that was great. They're still going to be worse. They're probably going to finish this year worse than they did last year. And I said that at the end of last season.
Yeah, and it could be the same case this year. They could play a lot, fun. It would be fun to watch. It'll be exciting. They'll be a running gun team, and they could still finish worse. And we could still say, it was fun to watch this year, and they're getting better.
I think what you're seeing this year, God, I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. I think Ryan Strome is better than Ryan Getzlaf for this team right now, right?
Yeah.
Ryan Strome's 29 years old. Ryan Getzlaf is like 400 years old. And I think from a middle of the roster perspective, Anaheim's forward group got better and their defense got worse. From a top of the roster perspective, I think their defense, Lindholm, Klingberg is kind of like, I'd love to have both, but I think I'd take Lindholm over Klingberg every time just because of his defensive game. So, but like Klingberg Manson is closer than I'd like to admit. I think what we've been saying this for fucking 3 years running is like ultimately what it comes down to is goaltending and special teams. It would require Trevor Zegras and Troy Terry to take another leap in play, right?
Well,
for this team to hit the level of consistent play that gets you into the playoff conversation in, like you said, a much improved Pacific Division.
Yep.
The Pacific Division looked like dog shit.
Not even
the
Pacific,
much better.
Just the Pacific Division. Like, let's look at where the Ducks finished and the teams underneath them last year and who got better, right? You would argue and you would think Montreal will be a little bit better this upcoming season. Seattle's going to be better. Philadelphia should be better than they were. New Jersey should be better. Ottawa should be better. Detroit is added and will be better. So then the teams that were below them last year, the only teams you could say comfortably should finish around the same and not be great are Arizona, are Chicago, and is Buffalo. San Jose, who finished just above them by 1 point, should be worse. Columbus will be better. The Islanders will probably be right around the same they were last year, a few points within, they're 8 points above the Ducks around that mix. Winnipeg, depending on what else they do, they could fall a little bit. But everybody else, I don't see them really falling off. The teams that were playoff teams last year, I don't see anybody that was up there that got significantly worse. So I just don't see, the Ducks have done anything more than those other teams to put themselves in a better position. They've had a good, like I said, they've had a good offseason. I think they've done well to replace what they lost, but all those other teams like Detroit, significantly better. Big additions to be better this year. Ottawa, significantly better. Major additions for them. When you look at last year's roster versus this year, which we try to do with the Ducks, clear difference for those teams, right? Seattle is the same. So then again, it comes down to, okay, teams like New Jersey and Philadelphia, they could falter and stay around that spot because they didn't do a ton to address their teams. But that still puts the Ducks in that conversation for bottom 10.
I really do think Philly gets a wild card spot.
They definitely could, because they still do have a better constructed roster in terms of overall talent than a lot of other teams.
Yeah, and they just got John Tortorella, who is going to make them play a style of game that, one, a lot of their players are suited for, and two, gets points and gets you into the playoffs. Like, that's the thing that everybody hates about Tortorella, is that it works. If it didn't work, he'd be fucking Jeff Fisher from the NFL, right? And you're just like, oh yeah, no, it doesn't work, but who cares? But it's like, no, he keeps getting in and he keeps keeping these jobs.
Fighting and the sneeze. Yeah, no, but yeah, you're right. Like Philadelphia, I don't know how they finished as bad as they did last year with the roster that they had. John Tortorella will do something for that team. Like, they will not only win 25 games next year. They will get a bit closer to what the Ducks had, and at the very least, like 31, 32, 33 games, and that would be considered a poor season from them. Like, I just don't know how they finished where they did last year. Everything went wrong for them. I think they had a stretch where they lost like 12 or 13 games in a row, and that just kills your season at that point.
They lost Ryan Ellis. They lost Sean Couturier. Like, they lost pieces along the way.
At the deadline, right? So
right. I think, Carter Hart fell off a cliff, and the team was coached by Mike fucking Yeo, who has never, ever fucking been the answer anywhere. Mike Yeo is so bad. I don't understand. He is such a bad coach. He has not done a good job in the NHL. He has made every team that he has joined look worse than they did the year before when he was replacing a guy that definitely got fired. It's just, anyways, I think the improvement behind the bench is going to be significant because Tortorella brings a style, he brings a system, he brings an expectation, he brings a baseline. He is kind of, in a lot of ways, the worst version. I don't want to say it that way. He's Barry Trotz-esque is what I'll say, in that you know what the teams are going to play like now that he's there. That, to me, sounds like a great situation for that kid in goal to play like the kid that was also Carter Hart before, because there's been two of them. Yeah. One of them's really good. The other one's not. And, I think that team will have the structure and the horses to play a style in front of him that gives him the best opportunity to succeed and allows that team to remain competitive on a nightly basis. There are going to be questions about where the goals are going to come from and things like that. James Van Riemsdyk, what do they do with that? But I do think there's reason to be excited. The other ones are Ottawa and New Jersey. Those are the two teams that I think you have to say, if the Ducks are moving down, these are who are moving up.
Yeah, I think Detroit's in that mix as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure on Detroit yet.
It's a really good addition for them.
I think they got better. I 100% think they got better. But let me see. Come on, hurry up.
2 points off the Ducks last year.
Okay, yeah. So they've still got Boston, Tampa, Toronto, Florida.
Yeah. Yeah, the teams in their division got better as well. We just talked about Ottawa getting better. They're in their division as well, right?
Yeah, so like Buffalo's going to be bad. So I think you can say the Montreal and Buffalo are the worst in the Atlantic. Who's the worst in the Metro? Who's the worst team in the Metro? Okay, tell me who you think the worst team of this is. Carolina, the Rangers, Pittsburgh, Washington, Islanders, Blue Jackets, Devils, Philly. Who's the worst team in that group?
Islanders or New Jersey.
You don't think it's the Blue Jackets? You think Johnny Drew does too much for him?
I think they're in that mix, but I think full season of KJ, full season of Goodrow, Line playing with those guys, Werenski. I think they have enough, but they'll be in that conversation because the other teams above them are just so good. But ultimately, I think unless the Islanders get Kadri, which is rumored they will, then that could change things and they could be better. But it's a new coach. It's Lane Lambert, first season in New York. Like, anything could happen there. The Devils their downfall will be their goaltending, likely. They didn't do anything.
You got a guy.
They've got Blackwood, Bernier, and I think they added somebody else, but I don't remember who it was. So I think it could definitely be them.
Hacking it? No, that's not right.
No,
anyways, it doesn't matter. Keep talking.
So yeah, I definitely think it could be them. And then the Islanders and the Blue Jackets might be slightly above them, like they were last year. I just can't see it being Philly again this year. Like I really can't. I would imagine they would be a little bit better. But so yeah, if I had to put my stake on anybody right now, and it's not a detriment to the team because I think they're really well built. They got a lot of good young players coming. It's probably New Jersey.
See, I think I'm much more comfortable with Columbus because they added John Marino. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. Yeah, like the additions that they made and the players that they kept, swapping out Eric Holla for Pavel Zacha. Like, I just think getting Eric Holla is exactly what he is. He's a very known commodity. He can be a third-line center or a second-line winger. He's a really good player. He's a lot of fun to have around. And I think getting Pavel Zacha out the door and putting Zacha in a new situation will be beneficial for him. But I think moving on was good for New Jersey. Like, I just think this team, like, I'm not sure they don't finish higher in this. Like, it would not surprise me if New Jersey finished higher in the standings than the Capitals. because I don't know that I expect Dylan Strome to replace Backstrom, who may never play again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I just, Oshie's a year older, and he's a power forward. Like, John Carlson's a year older. Like, for me, I have more confidence, I think, in New Jersey this year than I do in the Capitals.
Yeah, no, I can see it. It really is a mix of teams in there, and like I there's a world where Pittsburgh falls off. There's a world where Washington falls off, and things don't go to plan. Like I think there's a few teams that like you look at and say are locks. Like the Rangers are going to be good, and Carolina's going to be good. But everybody else, you're like, okay, like it's possible.
100%.
It's possible. There's a lot of it's definitely a stronger division in terms of teams having the potential to move up. But again, at the end of the day, somebody's going to lose more games than somebody else in that division, and there are a couple teams I think that are right in that mix, right? And it's just the Rangers and Carolina that I think are going to be a tier above everybody else. And Pittsburgh and Washington have a better chance of being more consistent across an entire season. But you could see a team like New Jersey get hot, and
dude, you're talking me out of it. Now I'm looking at them as like 7, like from the bottom 7.
Yeah,
like that feels much better to me.
It's so tough because it's
year.
Like if the Islanders added Kadri, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, New Jersey, they made a lot of additions, but they were worse than both those teams last year. The Islanders added Kadri, and the Blue Jackets added Goodrow. And you're just like, yeah, okay, you got Palat and Marino. Well, is Palat and Marino better than Goodrow and Goodbranson, right? Like, is it better than Kadri for what they added? Are the teams better constructed as is?
Palat is not better than Goodrow. I do think Marino is better.
Yes, Marino's better than Goodbranson. But like their additions across their entire lineup as a whole.
Right.
I don't know if like the Devils are quite there yet. And I think Jack Hughes is going to take another step forward, and I think Mercer will as well. But so will Kent Johnson. So will other players.
Well, the thing with Kent Johnson is it sounds silly, but like unless they do something, they lost Oliver Bjorkstrand, and I cannot stress enough how big of a deal that is for that team. Like losing him hurts in a meaningful way, especially from a cultured way. I like Goodbranson in a 5-6 role. I don't think that's going to be the end of the world. I think he's going to provide a dynamic that team needs and things like that. But I just think I'm not sold that the forward group as a whole, like, is Jack Roslovich's number 2 center? Who's the number 1 center? Like, do we, you know what I mean? Like, I just think there's still questions up front for that team in a way that I would, like I said, I think of everybody in that division to make a meaningful jump. I feel much more confident in the Devils than I do in the Islanders or the Blue Jackets.
Yeah, no, I could see it. They're definitely, like I said, like right in that mix, right, of teams that and could end up taking a step forward. I think they've all gotten slightly better from where they were last year, but again, there's just like I feel like there's just these teams in that Central Division that are significantly higher. I think the Metro Division. I think the Central is just as interesting as the Metro, right? Where you've got Colorado, who are going to be the favorites after winning the Stanley Cup. You've got Minnesota, who is still going to be in that mix. Now they're in it for a little bit tougher, losing Fiala, and they weren't really able to do much to add to that team.
That's right. They added Fiala, mother.
Yeah, and so Minnesota's going to have a tougher year because of the cap problems they have.
It doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
they're going to finish like 6th.
Yeah, LA got significantly better,
God.
so it's tough. St. Louis will be great.
They're still going to be bad. There's still a chance they finish worse than they did last year. I might still be right. Let's go.
That's what I'm saying. There's definitely a chance, a good chance, with all the way the teams have gotten better. Like the Central will be interesting because I think Chicago is clearly one of the worst teams in the league, probably the worst team on paper going into the season.
It's them or Arizona.
Yeah, so them and they're both in the same division. I can see them both finishing bottom. Then from there, I think Winnipeg is a separation off the other teams above them, but they're not as bad.
Are you sure Winnipeg's going to be good next year?
No, I mean they're bottom, like the third worst.
No, for sure. But for sure, like
I think they're
those
worse than Nashville.
3 teams, the 3 worst teams in the league is my question.
They could. I think there's a better chance that like Seattle and I know I really do like
Montreal.
Seattle's additions, but Seattle or Montreal, or Buffalo or San Jose, I think they have a better chance of being worse than Winnipeg. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Winnipeg have a Philadelphia type season, right? Where they weren't expected to be the fifth worst team or fourth worst team in the league, but they end up there because they're just so disorganized. A lot of guys don't want to be there. They weren't really able to add anybody. They have a guy they just signed to a year that doesn't want to be there. Like, there's a lot of things that can point to this just not really working out for them this year. So I could see it 100% if they finished as one of the worst three teams in the league. It's a surprise as you didn't expect them to be there because the roster on paper is better. But with all the things going on there, like it wouldn't be a major shock to see them to be the team that pulls a Philadelphia, right, and falls where you don't expect them to. So I can see that. And I think everybody above them, there's just a separation. I think when you look at Dallas and Nashville, I think they're good and they've gotten better in a sense. So they're kind of in that mix. And then St. Louis and Minnesota the next tier, and then it's Colorado at the top, right? Like there's a clear number one. Even if they don't bring Kadri back, I think it does make them a little bit worse. But they're just, again, Stanley Cup champs for a reason. So they are a tier above. But that's an interesting division to watch too, because
like it's Colorado, St. Louis, Minnesota, Nashville, Dallas. Yeah, that sounds right. That seems right. I hate that the Blues are going to be better than the Wild this year, but I have a very hard time thinking Minnesota. Well, maybe I guess Boldy pops and Rossi comes up. I mean, I guess there's a world in which those two kind of in the aggregate,
it's possible,
replace Fiala.
But when we look at off seasons that were had, and I if we just look at the rosters right now and at the start of the season, I'd probably put St. Louis above Minnesota. But it's very possible Minnesota finishes above them. But there's that clear like separation in tier where it's Colorado line, Minnesota, St. Louis line, Dallas, Nashville a line, Winnipeg, and then Arizona and Chicago at the bottom. So it's a little bit less definitive, or it's more definitive where we can kind of set these teams than I think like the Metro was, where there was like anybody, of those bottom four could jump up. We talked about New Jersey could be the worst team in that division. They could be a playoff team in that division. You don't really know where they could stand. This one feels a bit more definitive on where guys could go. Winnipeg maybe only being that weird team that could make the playoffs, but it could also be one of the worst teams in the NHL just because everything going on. With Scheifele not wanting to be there, Wheeler was on the trade block. Dubois is out of there at the end of next season. Like Hellebuck was rumored to be on the trade block, and nobody wants to play there.
Genuinely, in my opinion, 5-6 years ago, one of the best constructed teams in the league in terms of the way that their cap was set up and the way that their contracts ran, the young players that they had, the aging players that they had. They had and then they lost Trouba, and
there's something going on there, man.
Dude,
I understand
the whole thing fell apart.
The city
so fast.
It's not an enticing place to play, but there's a lot of places in the league.
He said that, not me. Canadian said it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of places in the league that are like that. But it feels like absolutely no one at all in the entire league wants to go to Winnipeg. Everybody always ends up wanting out, and when they leave, if you ever ask them about their time in Winnipeg, it's negative. Like, I don't know anybody that's left and be like, yeah, man, I loved it there. Like, they got rid of Laine because he didn't want to be there. Evander Kane didn't want to be there. Scheifele doesn't want to be there anymore. Like, maybe the only guy who wants to be there is Nick Ehlers, and that's it. I don't even know if he wants to be there. But he's from Denmark.
The Scheifele thing is interesting because he was certainly committed to that franchise for a while. Yeah. Like, he genuinely, he was the guy. And I think he hasn't quite developed into the player that everybody thought he was going to be. He's kind of seems to be a second-line center and not a first-line center. Maybe he could be a first-line center on 7-10 teams, but, like, that's kind of the point. And I just think he was there for some of those hard years where it was fucking him and Hellebuck and Trouba, and that was fucking it. And like Ehlers has been a really good player. Wheeler's been really good. Stastny was fine. It just, Scheifele is one of those guys that I don't have any issue with him being like, you know what, man, I've been here for like 6 fucking years and it has sucked the entire time. I have maintained, I have been dedicated to this franchise. I've put in the work. I've tried to play hard. You know what I mean? Like, I could just that wouldn't bother me as a Winnipeg fan if Scheifele is like, I just can't do this shit anymore. What bothers me more is the Dubois stuff. Constantly losing guys. The team's inability to fucking find another defenseman who can play 18 minutes a night. Like, I don't understand how that team just can't find fucking defensemen.
I think it comes down to the fact that there's just nobody wants to go to Winnipeg for whatever reason. Whether it is literally just that it's not an enticing place to play, it's not fun to play there during the winter. Like, it's not a great place to live either. So I don't know if it's just that, but again, like I said, there are other bad places to play and places that have that rap as not being great places to play, but they still end up getting players. And it just feels like Winnipeg never really makes a splash anymore in free agency. They don't really get a lot of guys. There's not guys that, Winnipeg always seems to land on a lot of players, no trade lists, and then they, guys who do get drafted there lately just want out and they're gone. And guys like, again, Laine was gone. You brought in Dubois in the Laine deal, and he doesn't want to play there either. Like, it's, and again, Trouba wanted to leave and goes to New York, and it's just like, man, like I don't know what's gonna happen there. And I am one of the teams again that felt like they were on the up. They were one of the funnest buildings to watch in the playoffs when they were going. Like, it was a great atmosphere there, but I don't know what it is, but the players and guys in the league not wanting to go there. But it's a worrying trend, I can imagine, for them. I don't care about Winnipeg, so it doesn't matter.
So real quick, let's do the one little announcement thing we wanted to do. One of the things me and Eddy want to do is a deep dive into one team in each division. If you guys are so inclined to entertain our nonsense, we figured it would be fun for you guys to pick a division and then pick a team. So Monday morning, we'll put out a poll for which division, and then once we get to that point, we will
put another poll for the team.
Put another poll together for teams. Thank you, Edward. God, my brain turned off. And then we'll go from there. And, we're going to try to get a guest or two for that. Just some people to kind of talk about the teams and get a better perspective on some of the teams. And just do some fun stuff like that. So if you guys are willing to entertain our nonsense, that poll will probably go up Monday morning. Might put it up this weekend. If it seems like it's a better idea, maybe. We'll talk about that later. But there's going to be a poll, and we wanted you guys to help us pick a team to go a deep dive on. Aside from that, I don't think there's any other crap we needed to talk about. We can just go back to being dumbasses.
Yeah. I wanted to. I really wanted to talk Huberdeau, that whole situation, because that's developed a little bit since I think we talked the trade. But I think the last show we talked about it, we took a Ducks approach to the Tkachuk side of things. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about that trade, and now that Huberdeau is signed, what that looks like for Calgary, how that trade kind of shakes out a little bit more now that those details have kind of been cleared up. Obviously, Uyghur is still a pending UFA for next season, but I think you can get a better outlook of who won that deal and how that trade looks for both sides. I still sit here, and I know a lot of people are getting on Florida saying that they're worse. I still love that trade for the Panthers so much. Like,
I don't see a world in which it's a bad trade for the Panthers.
I don't understand it. Like, I get a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah," like flipping the script, and I guess I can see that it's a better deal for Calgary now that they've got Huberdeau signed. I think in the short term that's true. If you're looking to stay competitive, again, there's no better player you could have gotten than Huberdeau.
Right.
That contract has the makings of looking like just a pile of shit at the end of it, because he's going to be 38 and still making $10.5 million. The thing for me with Florida is you know what, like the real one thing that hurts, I guess, is losing Uyghur. But other than that, man, like you were gonna have to sign Huberdeau the end of next year anyway, and you were gonna lock him down to 7 or 8 years at the same term that Calgary ended up paying him. And
they went from a core built around a 26 and a 30-year-old to a 26 and a 24-year-old.
Yeah,
there's no fucking world in which that's not a massive upgrade.
Well, you were looking at Florida's roster and you're wondering, like, okay, by the time they incorporate Lindell, when he's 3 or 4 years into the league, into that roster, Huberdeau is going to be 33, 34 years old, and the window that they had with him is going to be exhausted when the younger players start coming up, and Barkov is in like the real center of his prime. You've now addressed that, like you said, and now you're going to have Barkov going into his prime at the same time that Matthew Tkachuk is going into his prime, the same time that Lindell is really stepping up and hopefully taking over that 2C role with the team. And we looked at this team and said, why did they draft Spencer Knight? They're in a win now mode with Huberdeau and with Bobrovsky. Okay, well now all of a sudden, now it makes sense. Now Spencer Knight is within that same. But still, Spencer Knight is still within that same age range now at 21. That if they can ever move on from the Bobrovsky contract, or at least they could wait it out, and it's not detrimental at this team. They could wait it out, and the window is almost just starting potentially at that point, where you got these guys in their prime. Because at the end of that Bobrovsky contract, Barkov is 30, Tkachuk is 28. If Reinhardt's still there, he's 30. Bennett is 30. Ekblad is 30 as well. So Spencer Knight's 25. Like you've got like a new window that opens up all these guys in their prime.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way. It sounds stupid, but again, it's what I said. Like they just completely changed the duration of the core by swapping Huberdeau for Tkachuk.
Mm-hmm.
Tkachuk coming away from Gaudreau, if you said his points dropped, 15, 20 points, something like that, that wouldn't surprise me. I think that's more than fair. But I think you gain more than that 15 to 20 points in defense and in gumption. I just cannot stress enough how much having a guy like Matthew Tkachuk on your team can make a difference on a nightly basis. Like we saw it with Corey Perry. Like he's going to drive other teams crazy. And it's going to create opportunities. He's good in his own end. He's a good defensive forward.
How do you play against that line? How do you play against Tkachuk and Barkov, where you've got two legitimate Selke candidates in the center?
So that's what I was going to say. Is that now a Bergeron Marchand? Like, I'm not saying either of them are there, but I think it's fair to say that Tkachuk could be better than Marchand at the end of his career, and I think Barkov is a very good center.
I think it's fair to say they're almost, if not right there already. In Barkov being just as good as Bergeron and Tkachuk being just as good as Marchand, you could maybe make the argument again. Consistency
in Bergeron's career, let's be clear.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
If at the same age, Bergeron is better than Barkov.
Yeah.
But yes, 100%. I just want to be clear that I don't want it to seem like we're saying Sasha Barkov, your favorite,
you want to get mentioned
is as good
by Boston fans breathing down your neck here.
Patrice Bergeron.
Yeah.
By the way, you know what's super super shitty and sad?
What?
The Ducks could have taken him with the Perry pick. The two players that I think are the biggest what ifs that fell past Perry are Bergeron and Weber. Those are the two guys for me.
Yeah, I can see it. But, I mean, if you end up getting Perry at that pick, it's not the worst thing.
Oh, no, we got a heart winner.
But just honestly, the matchups against that line are going to be impossible. Like you said, Tkachuk is potentially the best defensive forward in the league, if not one of them, when you maybe Mark Stone and a few others that you could say are better than him. And Barkov, again, outside of Bergeron and Kopitar, he's right there, right, as the best defensive
I think his
center.
offensive, especially when you consider that his offensive output is going to be higher than an O'Reilly.
Yeah.
It's going to be higher than Eriksson Ek.
Just
right,
an all-rounded player.
I think that's the thing, is that his offense is of a caliber that it allows his defense to almost hurt you more because he can put it in yours and you're not going to put it in. You know what?
You backtracked on that one. But then
Anyway,
you plug Reinhardt in on a line with that.
It's going to be really hard to score goals against
Yeah.
Sasha Barkov, and it is going to be very easy for Sasha Barkov to score goals against you.
Yeah.
And that's just fundamentally an issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance for sure that the Panthers are not better. They're not President's Trophy team again next year. They still will be one of the best teams in that division and one of the best teams in the NHL. Again, maybe the toughest thing for them is losing Uyghur because they didn't get a direct replacement for him. But their defense is still good, man. You've got Ekblad, Montour, Forsling, Radko Gudas. You've got Lucas Carlson, who will play more games. He looked pretty good last year. Mark Stahl's a decent veteran to bring in to a younger core. So
he's fine. And if he's Anton Strawman, like, he's gonna play 14 minutes a night. Most of it's gonna be on the penalty kill. He's gonna be big and physical, and he's gonna barely be able to skate, and it's gonna be fine. It's just gonna be perfectly fine.
And I think when you look at, again, the fact that it was Barkov didn't play much with Huberdeau and they were split up. Now all of a sudden you've got Tkachuk, Reinhardt, Barkov. You've got Bennett. Even if you want to go Bennett, Verhaeghe, Duclair, and Lundell on the third line to play with like Hornquist and Colin White or whoever you want to play, and like they've just got a really good deep roster that is difficult to play against and difficult to match up against. And Barkov and Tkachuk are two of my favorite players in the league, so I just think I think it's a home run deal for the Panthers in just the very sense that we mentioned early on here, that your window gets extended by like 6 years just because you've gotten out of Huberdeau. And it's not that Huberdeau was bad. It's just
that's exactly what it is.
He was just the older player there.
Yeah, it's just, it's the whole thing. And Matthew Tkachuk is just so insanely good. And I just think even if they play him with Lundell, like, that raises the ceiling on what that line can be. You know what I mean? Like, if they think Lundell is able to step into a second-line center role, right? Because maybe Huberdeau not being there means you're not as comfortable putting Bennett as your second-line center. Fuck, man. You put Lundell in
the way he played last year, you could see it.
And Duclair together. You know what I mean? And then you're looking at, like, a top line of Barkov and Bennett and
Barkov played with Verhaeghe and they had a lot of chemistry last year. So even if it's Barkov, Reinhardt, Verhaeghe, and Tkachuk, Lundell, and Duclair or Bennett or whatever, you've got a lot of flexibility there, and they could definitely do that. I just can't imagine. Like, I imagine having to try and match up against Barkov and Tkachuk on the ice at the same time just would not be a lot of fun for anybody to go against.
No, it sounds fucking miserable.
But dude, like even on the Calgary side, I do think I personally am more happy from the Florida side of things and what they got and how that helps the team. I think the one thing I will say with Calgary, when there's a lot of people when I say, I think Calgary still, they didn't lose that trade, that you get some eye rolling and whatever. Mm-hmm. I do think if you wanted to stay competitive, and we lock ourselves into that notion that Calgary wanted to stay competitive, the best deal they could have got was Huberdeau, and the best thing to happen for them if that's the case is to lock Huberdeau down to a long-term contract. Like, they had to.
Right.
There's no way, like, you can't lose him at the deadline. You can't flip him again now at this point, or you might as well just got futures anyway. You had to lock him down, and to do that, you're going to have to pay him a lot of money, and it easily could backfire at the end of the day because his contract looks like it could be really bad at the last 3 or 4 years of the deal. But they needed to lock him down, and what this does is it gives them a direct replacement for Johnny Gaudreau. And they got Mangiapane back, and we've talked about this before. The only thing left is to kind of replace like what Matthew Tkachuk brought you, and if that could turn into Kadri, which it seems like it might not at this point, that would be the next step for them. But you had to do something to try and replace at least one of these guys, and it's not very often that you can go out and acquire a player who scored over 100 points this season, the last 2 seasons prior to that. So I still give them a little bit of credit for that. I do like the Huberdeau addition for Calgary. I think it is a big win for them to convince him to stay immediately without playing any games there and lock him down for 8 years. Because you have the opportunity, like we talked about him, maybe going to Montreal or whatever, right? Like you have the pick of the lot there.
So, okay, a couple of things. One, Sean McIndoe at The Athletic wrote a really interesting article, and he's talked about it before, where one of the biggest problem contracts you can sign is the shiny new toy contract, which is where you bring a guy in, and it's incredibly clear right from the jump that he is going to get the deal that he wants. He uses Erik Karlsson as an example. He uses, I think, Evander Kane was an example, because I think Kane came in at 5.25 and then signed his 9.5 or whatever it is with the Sharks. But there's other. Those are just the two.
There's a ton of other examples for sure.
But there's a bunch of examples of that, and so it puts the franchise in a little bit of a bind as far as leverage is concerned with the arguments. That being said, you're absolutely right. Getting it done right away, not dicking around, and just being like, look, let's just figure it out, and we're going to do this now. I think that's a very good sign for them. It clearly commits them to being a win-now team. They have a win-now coach. They've got a win-now roster. The number of players that they would have to move on from.
Yeah.
I get the argument that it's just easier to remain competitive because, one, it's really hard to become competitive, and two, you already have some of the pieces you need, right?
They did all that work to go out. I mean, you've got a Lindholm who is 27. You've got Blake Coleman, who you acquired, who's 30. Backlund's 33. Mangiapane is 26 and just coming into his own. Your defense core, Hannafin's 25. Anderson's 25. Your goaltender, who is 32, right? I'm sure it was a tough decision, but you tear it down and you trade Tkachuk for futures. The rest of these guys are out the door at some point. Mangiapane, you might stick around, but you have to find a way to move Coleman in his no trade clause. You've got to find a way to move Toffoli, who you just acquired. You've got to find a way to get rid of Tanev and Zadorov and Markstrom, and it's a major commitment. You're committing to a full rebuild.
It's a lot of fucking work. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, didn't Sutter just win Coach of the Year?
Yeah.
He won the Jack Adam, right? I just,
you
know what, man? Honestly, talking this through with you now, I'm actually a bit more positive on it than I was before. And
it takes some balls, man, to honestly to go out
100%.
there and say, you know what, we're gonna, because if it messes up, you look dumb, because later on, you'll rue the fact that you didn't get the futures and tear it down when you should have. If Calgary really just doesn't look competitive over the next couple of years. But it does take some balls right now to commit to that and be like, yeah, we're going to try. And we're going to, this is the best way we could get it. And you took the biggest of all swings to get there because you acquired a player who's just as good, if not better, than the guy you lost in free agency for nothing, right? And I think Huberdeau is a better player than Johnny Gaudreau. And I could make the argument that he is a better offensive player than Matthew Tkachuk.
I think both of those things are reasonably true. I think he's better. So here's the other thing. So I'm working on something, so I don't want to spoil the whole thing. But Johnny Gaudreau had one of the 5 best seasons by point production in the last 10 years with 115 points. Mm-hmm. He left. Jonathan Huberdeau came in. I don't know if you know this, but they were tied in points. Yep. So Jonathan Huberdeau had one of the 5 best seasons by points of anybody in the last 10 years. Like you said, you're not going to get a better player in a trade than Jonathan Huberdeau. Anybody better than Jonathan Huberdeau is not worth trading away, and anybody below him is not worth Matthew Tkachuk. You know what I mean? It's a very slim group of players.
Yeah.
The thing that is the problem is the Huberdeau contract because it's a hard cap. That is going to be a bad contract down the line. Mm-hmm. And that's unavoidable. But like you said, they have pieces to remain competitive. Like, their defense core is surprisingly young. Like, Chris Tanev is, I think, the oldest one at like 30. But Hanifin and not Lindholm.
Everybody's under 29 except Tanev, who's 32. And it's Uyghur, who's 28. So,
I mean, I guess the question for me is this. At what number do you walk away from Uyghur, who is the second best defenseman there? I mean, I think he's better than Tanev, and he's better than Anderson. So you figure maybe Hanifin? Because it's Rasmus Anderson, right? That's the fourth guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got Shillington, too. And Uyghur-Shillington actually makes a lot of sense as a pairing. Do you try to move on from Chris Tanev? Do you just run three great pairs? But, like,
I think it's anything 6 or over, you walk away from him.
I think it has to be 7. I think if he asks for Cam Fowler's deal, I think you have to give it to him.
I could see it.
Mark.
I could definitely see it. Anything between 6 and 7 is like a scary territory for me. But again, like, you're in that position where you have to do it almost, right? And
you're going to be out of the Backlund deal soon. You're going to be out of the Lucic deal next year, the Monahan deal. Like,
the Monahan deal, or
it's not a complete shoot yourself in the foot to give him the Cam Fowler deal.
Yeah. Well, like the Lucic deal expiring itself covers the extension to Huberdeau going from 5.9 to 10.5. So Monahan's contract comes off the books, and that gives you enough room to give Uyghur an extra 4 and still have a little bit of room to get stuff done at that point. You've also got, like you said, Backlund, who comes off the books the year after that at 5.35. That, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to continue to add to that roster if you want to. And then you could, maybe you move out a Tanev or something, but he's done in 2 years as well, right, when you have to resign Elias Lindholm. So there is a real, like, path, as long as they don't go out and sign or add somebody to another ridiculous contract. There is a pathway where, like, some of these contracts do expire, that it will give you enough cap room to go out and make an addition and continue the run, right, and add some younger players at that same amount. Like, you could replace a Backlund with a younger player for the same amount of money that he makes. Eventually, it catches up to you, because that guy you replace Backlund with, you're signing to a 4 or 5 year deal likely, and then eventually you get to this window where things don't match up anymore, likely when Huberdeau is turning like 35, 36, 37. But at that point, that's when you're expecting that turnover to happen, and you to have to rebuild. So they're giving themselves 6 or 7 years, hopefully, here, of some good shots at going all the way, right? So that's what I see it with them. I don't think it's as bad as it's necessarily been made out to be, especially if your goal is to stay competitive. It's the best they could have done, and I think it's the best anybody could do if you're looking to stay competitive and you're losing your 2 best offensive players.
Let me ask you this. Would you have traded Tkachuk for Marner?
That's tough.
Because I'm trying to think of someone just young enough and good enough, and because, like, you can't trade, like, maybe you could do him and, like, Topi Niemela and Nick Robertson if you wanted Nylander. Like, maybe you can do, because I think it's more than fair to say Tkachuk is better than Nylander. Like, I love William Nylander, but Tkachuk is a better player, so maybe that's kind of what you do. But anyways, I think there's two things for me that is concerning. One, like you said, is these deals aren't necessarily the problem. It's what they limit you doing in the future. So the margin for error becomes smaller, right? Because theoretically, you've basically said, this is our bad contract. Every team has a bad contract. This is ours. everyone else we have to get right. I'm fine with that. That's totally fine with that. Huberdeau's going to come in. He's going to be, what's the soccer term? A talisman. Like, he's going to be everything. And that's great. Get Weegarrick signed. That puts you in a really good spot. So it's just how well can they really walk that line over the next couple years and not put themselves in a position where they're losing 2 good players because they brought in one pretty good player at too much money. The other thing that worries me if I'm Calgary, I have no fucking prospects. I think it's just Connor Zary and
Matthew Coronado and Connor Zary. But yeah.
Oh, and then was it Derek Wolf, the kid in goal?
Yeah, and even that is.
I think he had him. I think Wheeler had him as 4th.
Yeah.
Just ahead of Dostal. So I mean, that's not nothing.
Yeah, but so yeah, you're right. It's Zary, it's Coronado, and maybe Jeremy Poirier. But we talked about him in the draft year of that being like, okay, like.
Love him, not giving up on him, but
you don't know. So
there's a lot there.
You've got Zary, who essentially comes in and replaces eventually Monahan in the similar type of player, and Coronado can be like a light version of Johnny Gaudreau, smaller, skilled player. So you need those players because you need some younger guys on entry level, cheaper deals that could come up and contribute. So that they are lucky they have at least 2 of them, because there are a lot of teams out there who are in the same position of Calgary who don't have any, and they're all
Pittsburgh.
Exactly, and Washington as
Washington,
well, that are scraping to get. Washington had that essentially where they brought in McMichael and now LaPerriere, and that's it. But now they're back to square one with nobody. So it's better to have 2 than none. But you are right, like Calgary will get to that dangerous territory here where they should be good enough to make the playoffs every year. They're going to have to hope that the guys they get with those later first-round picks are enough to kind of supplement this roster and add to it.
I almost wonder, do you think it would be better to utilize those firsts to bring in players to strengthen the team for the run each year and just really invest in, scouting for, your second and third-round picks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you could talk me into being that makes the most sense because – even if it's a first-year guy, a first-round pick, he's likely not coming in for 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. If you're competitive and if you can have some success in the later rounds, which, there's no fucking way to know at the time that it matters, but still, you can get away with moving all your first-round picks. If you move them in that year for help, right? Like the Brandon Hagel deal, right? Where he's got 2 more years after the year they got him at 135. You know what I mean? Just these kinds of deals that, again, smart teams make. I think there's a lane there, but I do think it's just the margin of error for me. And like we talked about with Anaheim, right? The best thing Anaheim has is they've got 3 guys at every position that you're well, at least one of them should work out. Mm-hmm. They don't have that. They've got a center, they've got a winger, they got a goalie.
Yep.
At that point, it's, the goalie's nice to have. He's a smaller goalie, but he's supposed to be incredible. And, his should be coming up right around the time Markstrom's deal is looking to get out. So that's great. But if Coronado or Zary don't hit, they might not be in a position to walk away from Mangiapane at 29 when he's going to want $6 or $7 million a year. Where now, I don't want to pay him at 5'8" for 3 years. If he can continue to be, the finisher on the other side of Lindholm from Huberdeau, that's huge. I think that's great. That's a great position to be in. But you don't want to get caught paying him too much money to stick around, because that's when you really hurt yourself, right? You don't want to give him the Kings Gaborik deal.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with Calgary is they were actually at the point where they did it properly. They hit on guys like Mangiapane and Gaudreau. They got the guys at the top of the draft in Tkachuk. Anderson panned out for them. Chillington panned out for them. They had a lot of their own drafted players that had stuck in this roster, and they were starting to add. Dubé is another one. They were starting to add players with the draft picks and with the prospects to the team to fill it out, adding Markstrom, adding Hannafin, adding Toffoli, right, where it was starting to piece together, and they got kind of fucked over and having losing Johnny Gaudreau because he didn't want to be there anymore and wanted to go closer to home, and then that kind of coinciding with also losing Matthew Tkachuk, because I do find it hard pressed to say if you could bring Johnny Gaudreau back, do you lose Matthew Tkachuk as well, right? And that's the tough thing.
I think you lose Matthew Tkachuk no matter what.
You could for sure.
I think it's fair to operate from that position.
Yeah. So, but you lose, your two key pieces, both of which you drafted. So I think it's slightly harsh to look at Calgary's prospect pool and be like, oh man, like they fucked it, because you did have your prospects pan out and you had built a team off those prospects and were starting. You had done it properly, and it just now they got dealt a tough hand this offseason that now you're kind of starting from a different position and the prospect pool doesn't look that great. But yeah, that's the question at every deadline is, do I keep my first round pick and do I add to the prospect pool and this guy comes in later, I use the prospect as a trade bait, or is the first round the need that I have enough that I can go out and get the right player to fit this roster that's going to, add to our run here and hopefully win a Stanley Cup, that I can get rid of that first round pick. You could take the Pittsburgh approach where they do it literally every year and just trade that first round pick and send it out the door and hope that you hit.
Detroit did it before.
Yeah, and hope you hit on your later picks, or you have what Pittsburgh does where they magically make guys appear from the NCAA that just turn into pretty good hockey players. Like I don't know how they do it, but it's a weird approach because there's some teams who never trade the first. Toronto seems to be one of those teams who keep it and draft and are now.
This Dubas is a coward.
Yeah, and now they're trying to take this approach where they're going to supplement this very expensive roster with all these guys that they've drafted and see if that works out. I'm trying to think of maybe another team that's done it that way, and I don't know on recent memory. I can't really think of one of a team that's kind of built it that way, because most of the teams end up trading their first round picks to add at the deadline. That's been kind of the approach and the carbon copy approach for the last decade or so, is that when you get to a competitive point, that first round pick just goes out the door and you bring in somebody good at the deadline to help support the team. But I would imagine Calgary will probably be in that spot because there are some holes on the roster that you would imagine that first round pick could help you fill at the deadline. At center, if they don't go out and add anybody else, it's just Lindholm and Backlund's probably better as a good third line center than a second line center. So if you can go out and get a guy like that with your first round pick, but I think
so. Here's my question.
Yeah.
Would you trade your first for Calgary this year for Christian Dvorak?
No. And
no?
I don't. I again, Dvorak's a former London Knight, and I loved him when he was in London. I don't think he's the profile of player you trade the first round pick for. Personally, I don't think he brings more to the lineup than what they could potentially get out of Backlund or maybe even Monahan. Right? Like I'm not a major Dvorak fan. He's not the type of guy who would use the first round pick, and I'd almost rather just go and use it on a higher profile rental than going out and getting Christian Dvorak.
Oh, like Jonathan Toews?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one.
I mean, for real, honestly. I'd
rather, fuck.
I'd rather have Taves for a year.
Miller.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's no way you're moving him in division if you're Calgary or if you're Vancouver, right? We've talked about that
If anybody's going to do it, Jim Rutherford is crazy enough to do so.
But the thing for me, again, if you're Calgary, you're losing.
Alvin or Hughes? Which one's where?
It's Alvin.
Hughes is in Montreal. Yeah.
But then if you're Calgary, you're losing Coronado and Zari to do that. You're not giving up a roster player to get him, right? You're giving up a first for sure, but then you're probably losing.
You're giving up a first. You're probably
giving
seeing
up
if you can get
one
one with giving
of
him
Zari.
hockey.
Yeah, maybe. But you're giving up one of Zari and Coronado as well to get him. Now, you're getting JT Miller, so it doesn't really matter. You can probably move Zari out if you're getting JT Miller. That's fine.
What is JT Miller's next contract?
Yeah, and can you fit it under? It's with a $10.5 million Huberdeau, right? So that's the It's the question.
Man.
But yeah, I think Calgary will be fine next year. I think that if they don't replace Kachuk or get somebody else in there that could be a top 6 forward, I think they'll be slightly worse. But
That's the thing that you said that I wanted to comment on is bringing in Huberdeau to replace Johnny Kachuk is fantastic. Like you said, I think it is 100%, probably an upgrade in quality of player. The problem for that is you got Huberdeau in the Kachuk trade, which means
you still lost one of them for nothing.
You still lost one of them, yeah, and that's the thing for me that it hurts, right? And again, it just shrinks the margin of error because it doesn't mean they're fucked completely, but 115 points guys don't grow on trees. Neither do 80, 85, 90 point, potentially 30 goal Selke guys, right? So, again, maybe you can go out and recreate some of Kachuk in the aggregate with a couple of smart moves, Naz and Kadri, JT Miller, something like that. You do have the issue, though, where you have to start asking about next contracts and things like that. If they could get out of Lucic and Monahan, I could see them giving JT Miller maybe 7.5 a year.
Yeah, but he's going to ask for 9. The guy had 99 points last year. I can't imagine. Yeah, the thing for me is where you stand right now is you lost Kachuk and Goodrow, you got Huberdeau and Weegar. The first and
trade for Bo Horvat,
or
you
whatever.
idiots. Trade for Bo Horvat, you absolute fools.
They are what they are, the prospect and the pick you got. But again,
fuck, dude. This is it. No, we're not. No, we're not. No, this is what we're talking about right now. We're talking about Bo Horvat. No.
But you are slightly worse off with Huberdeau and Weegar than you were with Goodrow and Kachuk. But you make another addition or two there, then you're a little bit closer. You're back to where you were, right? But it is tough.
What if you go out and get Yanni Gourde?
Yeah, you could. I mean, his role has potentially diminished in Seattle with a lot of the additions that they made. Seattle's going to be a fun one to watch for me this year, man. I really like what they did. Burakovsky and
dude, they added Burakovsky, yeah, and Bjorkstrand. Fuck, that's going to be a good team.
I know they did something else too.
That's a problem.
Was I know obviously Shane Wright. I don't know if he's going to play the full season.
Groovy, Alexiak, Dunn, Carson, Justin Schultz. Okay. Sure,
maybe they didn't.
Carson Stowsley.
Do anything else?
Yeah. Oh boy.
It's just like it's not a great.
There's a version of this roster that's really good.
They lack.
There's a version of this roster that's really good.
They lack some centers. You're putting a lot of pressure on Benier and maybe Wright because it's just Yanni Gourde and Wenberg as your center, so that hasn't changed. But if Benier's takes a leap and challenges for the Calder, if Shane Wright comes in and looks pretty good, it's it'll be fun. I'm looking. It's a lot more fun to watch them than Vegas when they jumped off right off the bat. So it's just an interesting approach to the whole thing, man. Like you got a couple good picks, and then you're like, we don't want to be bad this year. We don't want to be as bad this year, and you convince a high profile free agent and Burakovsky to come over. Give him some term and some money. You make a really nice trade to get Oliver Bjorkstrand, and he's locked down for 4 years. So it's like, okay, like you've got the picture of this team for the next little bit. And you hope that the prospects and Beniers and Wright develop, and you can go out and add another, a couple other free agents to this, and all of a sudden it starts looking like you're competing in the playoffs in the next couple of years. And you didn't have to go out and get a bunch of prospects to do it. You just happened to get 2 very good young prospects that are in the prime position to get them in 2 centers. You could see a future of Wright, Beniers down the middle, 1-2, with the rest of these guys around them.
Would you trade one of Wright or Beniers for Chychrun?
No.
Coward.
Nope, I would not. I don't see why that makes sense for Seattle.
Because he's fucking 24 years old. He's the best defenseman on the team.
Trust me, I get it, and it's no knock against Chychrun. It's just you have your future down the middle here I feel like it's harder to get what you can get out of Beniers and Wright than it will be what you can get out of Chychrun if they even just pan out to what their base level is. You get at the very least Beniers and Wright, 2 top 6 centers. Maybe they're not first line guys, but
so this is what I was going to ask: is the dream for those two, if you're Seattle, O'Reilly, Shen, like St. Louis?
Yeah, I guess so.
That's pretty
at the
close.
Base, right? Like, yeah. I think they could both be better than that, but I think like at the
O'Reilly's
very
really
least,
good.
man,
He's an idiot, but he's really
he
good.
is really good. I think that's what you would hope for Wright, is O'Reilly.
Yeah, and Beniers. I mean, if Beniers is Braden Shen, that's not bad
Yeah,
at all.
and I think he could be. I think he could be more
Better.
a Larkin type player almost, right? So I think that.
Can we just talk about random players Calgary should trade for the next 30 minutes?
Yeah.
It's my new favorite game.
They need. They just need.
Oh, they should trade for Matt Barzal. Okay, so we can't do this because I really am just going to look at every team and come up with somebody. Okay.
Look at everybody. We should probably wrap it because we're getting close to 2 hours, and we have a brand to stick to. If we go over 2 hours, we're going to be getting the comments about our 2 to 3 hour shows. We try, but we're gonna have the poll that comes out soon.
Did we want to touch? Let me ask you this, Ed, just straight up, since apparently I ruined your day with your cell phone. Is there a world in which you think there is a match for Gibson in Vegas?
Oh, that yeah, and then putting the blame on me that I was the one putting those tweets out there.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It is something I would probably do, stir up the pot a little bit. But would I trade him to Vegas?
Well, no, not that. I don't. It's not. Would you trade it? Is there a fit? Because this was something that you were kind of talking about on Twitter. Is that the match isn't really perfect, and because Laner still has term. There is something to be said about it might be worth it for Vegas just to hold on to him, find a temporary goalie, see what Logan Thompson has in the tank, something like that. I just more than one person and a lot of people who are outside of Anaheim made comments about, oh well, now they get Gibson or Ullmark, and so my question is like, do you think there is a world in which a trade can happen between those two, or do you think it's just too hard?
I think there is the because of the need and because Vegas with the team they've constructed are going to be desperate to get they cannot go into the season with Laurent Brossoit as their starting netminder. Like it just can't. They're going to do something. And again, we talked about this with when Edmonton and when Washington and what other teams were looking for netminders, and John Gibson's names were among the rumors, is that if those teams miss out on certain guys, then obviously they're going to be interested. And then Toronto showed up their goaltending, Washington did, Edmonton did. So there's nothing left, right? There's no other. I don't think there's really any other goaltenders on the market. Maybe Ullmark, like you said, because Boston could go that route. He seems like a Vegas type signing. Ullmark does, but the problem is I don't think the Bruins can take on the salary that Vegas would need to move out to make it happen, because Vegas can.
Well, they would just have to swap them because they both make $5.
Yeah, but then if you're Boston, do you want to move out Ullmark to bring in Laner, who isn't going to play for the entire year? Yeah, you can put him on LTIR, but you lose a player that could play games for you, and I think they like having a Swayman Ullmark combo at the back.
I agree.
You don't have a player coming in like that trade on paper makes Boston worse because Laner's not going to play, and it depends what else you would get in that deal if you're Boston, right?
Right. There's also the opportunity to put him on LTIR, and now instead of spending that $5 million on a backup goalie or a 1B goalie, you can put that into your forward group, which is like kind of not very good. Even if Bergeron and Krejci came back, they $5 million worth of offense would go a long way for Boston.
Yeah, Bergeron and Krejci, I think, are back.
They're both back.
Nice
$1
deals.
million and 2.5.
Nice deals for them too.
1.5 and 2.5.
Boston's lineup is
awesome.
so interesting because half their forward group is a UFA next year, so It's just wild. Everybody outside of Pasternak, or not even Pasternak, Marchand, Hall, Coyle, and DeBrusque are UFAs next year. So, but I do see a world where Gibson could go to Vegas. Like the thing with Vegas, I don't know what they're gonna do, because as of right now, they are $5.7 million over the cap. So you could do a straight swap of Gibson for Lehner, but ultimately Vegas is still going to be over the cap and is going to have to figure something out.
Well, they've got Vegas, right?
They've
Or
got Weber, but
right?
I believe you have to be cap compliant before that. Like, you have to be under the cap no matter what before you can even use that LTIR space, because his cap will count against your cap until you can use the space, right? So I think that was the whole thing with the Kessler thing, is like you can't be over going into the season even with a guy like that. You can place him on the long-term injured reserve after you get past that point, but you have to be cap compliant even with him going into the season. I think that's the case. If it is, you've got to move out some more money if you're Vegas. Anaheim has the ability to do both, right? To take on something to help that out. And, God, the dream scenario is somehow getting Shea Theodore back.
No,
it is, dude. It is. Tell me it's not.
It's not.
Tell me it's not.
It's not.
Why?
He's 27 years old.
You can't.
Where's he going to play? On his offside?
No, on the left with Fowler. I don't see how that is completely awful. Of the other players that they would dump for cap, how is he not the best player you could get out of Alex?
Are you sure here's my question.
What?
Are we 100% sure that it wouldn't be better for Anaheim to take White Cloud and Waugh?
I mean, yes, but are you going to move two players you just signed in new contracts?
Neither of them are as good as fucking Shea Theodore.
No, for sure.
That's my
I just think it's. I mean, if you're Vegas and you're gonna move, if
you're Vegas, why are you moving him? You don't have another top pair left-handed defenseman.
My point is, you have to move something. You have to move something. And of all the players on their team who make over $4 million, even over $3 million, he is the only one that has absolutely no terms on that contract. Braden McNabb has a 10-team no-trade list. Alec Martinez has a 16-team no-trade list.
No, it's 12-team.
Is it 12-team? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And then 8-team next year.
He's got a 12-team no-trade list. Petrangelo you need to keep anyway, but he's got a no-move clause. You just signed Riley Smith. You're not going to move him, but even if you wanted to, he has a 12-team no-trade list.
No, you can't. You cannot trade that fucking guy.
No.
You cannot trade that fucking guy.
Marcia Show has a 5-team no-trade list. William Karlsson has a 10-team no-trade. Mark Stone's a no-move. Jack Eichel's a no-move. You're not going to move them anyway. Tell me he's not the easiest to dump over $5 million in cap space. He is. But do you want to move him? No. But if you're going to bring in a goaltender and you need to move out Lehner plus to do so, it's just they have nothing else.
Do they need? That's my thing. Do they need $10 million in cap space, or do they need $6.5 million in cap space? Because again, if you're bringing in a goalie with actual term, then you're not sending Lehner the other way.
I don't know. I have to.
Or then you have to send Lehner the other way.
I think you have to.
If you're bringing in a goalie with term, you have to send Lehner the other way.
Yes, and then if it's Lehner for Gibson, you're already adding, what is Gibson, 5.9, right?
6.4.
6.4. Okay, so you're already adding another 1.4 on top of the 5.7 they're over. So all of a sudden you're now over $7 million over the cap, right?
Yep.
So you've got to move out some money to do that. So then I think it becomes again, you have to move one of those big guys. The rest of them have terms on their contract. I don't think you're moving one of your top forwards because there isn't a lot of depth after losing Pacioretty. You've got to kind of keep the guys you have up there because it is Eichel, Stone, Karlsson, Marchand, Riley Smith, Nick Waugh. That's it. I think it is it is possible for them to move Shea Theodore and still be okay because you've got Pietrangelo, Martinez, McNabb, Whitecloud, Nick Hague. Like, it's not better, but it's better than losing one of those forwards, and he's the easiest one to include in the deal because there's no terms. You're gone. You're out the door. And then maybe it just coincides with moving, who is Brett Howden's 1.5, and then all of a sudden you're fine. You're under the cap. You move Brett Howden's 1.5 in the same deal if you want, or somewhere else. Just get him out the door.
Carrier, Colasar.
Yes, one of those guys, and then you're fine.
Jailer Stevens.
Get the Ducks to eat $1 million or something off John Gibson's contract and throw in a pick or something, and like it could work. And like, listen, it's a pipe dream scenario of somehow the Shea Theodore situation coming full circle, and he comes back. He comes back to the Ducks.
It's so annoying.
But yeah, man, like I don't know if it was to happen, it's the most reasonable big piece that comes back surprisingly becomes Shea Theodore. As good as he is and as valuable he is to that team, the most likely big contract that comes back along with Lehner is Shea Theodore because they don't have the prospects to make it work. They don't. Like, it's what you think you're going to get there first in Brendan Brisson, and that's going to be enough for John Gibson. I don't think the Ducks do it. They just keep him at that point. So it's going to have to be Shea Theodore and like. Again, the deal doesn't stop there. It's not only are they getting John Gibson, it's you are taking Robin Lehner, who's out for the year. Like, there's something to be said about doing that and getting that. And what do you get for that? So what else do you get on top of that? As good as Shea Theodore is that enough, right? And you're freeing the cap space for them to be cap compliant. How much does that cost? So it's such a dealing with Vegas is always interesting and what that could look like. And I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. I don't see it happening, but they're going to get desperate. They're going to do something, and some team's going to bite. They need a goaltender. There's absolutely no way they go into the season with this roster and have Laurent Brossoit as the starter. I can't see it, and I don't think there's anybody left in free agency to go out and really get.
I heard Derek Grant plays goalie really well. Actually, fuck. You know who's actually perfect for them to go get?
Whoa.
Fucking Anthony Stolarz.
Yeah, but I mean,
less than $1 million.
But you
clearly
can't. Like you can't though, right? Like there's the team that has as much expectations as that. You telling me they're gonna go into the season with Brossoit and Stolarz?
Well, no, they are going in with Stolarz and Logan Thompson, who is the guy that some people think can absolutely step in, similar to Swayman.
I think Varlamov is likely if he waives his no trade clause to go there, and you can get.
Would you swap Lehner for Grubauer?
No. I mean, but you have to, so yes. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, you have to because he's out for the year.
Anthony Stolarz. Like, I mean, I get what you're saying. I
think Varlamov is the most likely. Because I think you could convince, well, again, if the Islanders sign Kadri, maybe they don't eat the salary, but it is a straight swap in dollars, 5 and 5. Varlamov is a 16-team no trade though, so it all depends if he wants to go there or not. But if you can be the starter in Vegas, if you're Varley, do you stay as the backup to Sorokin, or do you go be the starter in Vegas? I would imagine he would waive to go there. So I think the most likely goalie situation for Vegas is they somehow get Varlamov and maybe have to pay a little bit for him to go there. Other than that, there's just really nobody else available because every team has kind of figured out their goaltending situation, right? At this point, like, there just isn't any other goaltenders that seem like they would be available that would make sense and would be like a guy who could actually be a starter beyond Varlamov, Gibson, and maybe Ullmark. Like, I don't really see any other scenario there for Vegas that they could go out and do anything. Like, you're not getting Hellebuck from Winnipeg.
So that's who I was going to mention. Would you do Lehner a first, Brisson, and Whitecloud if they sent back Hellebuck?
Yeah, I mean, you're Vegas, yes, right? Like, you need it. You cannot waste a season. You just can't. with the team they've built and what they've done to build that team and the turnover they have and a Pittsburgh approach with an absolute empty cupboard of prospect pool, you have to do something. And if that means you lose your first in Brisson and Whitecloud to go get it, like, you need to. There's absolutely no way they can afford to burn a year with the moves that they've made over the last couple of years of getting Pietrangelo, getting Eichel, getting Strome, like getting Pacioretty at one point, right? Like, and now you've let Pacioretty walk. Like, you're not tearing it down. You're going
They
for
didn't
it.
let him walk. They fucking traded him.
Whatever. You got rid of him, and you dumped his cap for nothing.
He's going to miss fucking 6 months. He's going to miss 6 months. And they got to keep Riley Smith. It's not nothing. I'm not doing this with you right now. We can argue about this later.
Yeah, but they will get desperate. My point is Vegas.
They should trade for
if
Saros.
Vegas
That'd be
doesn't
funny as
do
shit.
anything, it would blow my mind. It would make no sense to me whatsoever if they didn't go out and get a goaltender. I think Varlamov is probably the option, and then from there, the only other two options I really see of guys who I think would be starters, unless I'm forgetting somebody, would be Gibson and Ullmark. And those are tough deals to make happen. Boston, because I don't think they have the cap space to accommodate a move like that. And Anaheim, because I just don't, like, unless they get their socks blown off, like, you're not moving John Gibson. So that's like Shea Theodore, Brisson, and like a first to do all that, to get that to happen, to also to take Lehner on, who, whether he plays again is a question mark, and to give them the cap relief and John Gibson, right? So it's like,
you could maybe go get Corpusalo, but he's not like good.
yeah,
but he's only 1.3.
Does Columbus want to do that?
Yeah, they've been trying to get rid of that dude for like 3 years.
Do they have the cap space to get it done, to make it work, to take on Lehner, to take on anything else? Like,
well, here's my thing.
They're over the cap right now as is.
If you bring in Corpusalo, you're not trading away Lehner. He only makes 1.3, and he's a UFA at the end of the year. So basically, what you're doing is you're bringing him in and basically throwing him and Brossoit and Thompson and anybody else that you can find on the scrap heap in, and just being like, one of you is going to keep this job.
Yeah. Well, then, so
And
Vegas is
we'll
making another move then, because they have to move money out. It's impossible for them to add more money right now. Or, I mean, they can, but like...
Wait. I need to find the Cap Friendly tweet, because I think Cap Friendly tweeted about this.
I swear I've been operating under the assumption that no matter if you have a guy who's ready to go on LTIR, you cannot place them on LTIR until the season begins, and you have to be cap compliant with them on the roster going into that year.
With both Lehner and Weber LTIR eligible and out for the entire season, Vegas can exceed the upper limit by up to $12,857,000. In other words, their new upper limit can be $95 million.
Okay, shit.
This will give them plenty of roster flexibility throughout the season.
So they can go into the season being over the cap by that much?
Uh-huh.
Even with Lehner not on the LTIR right now?
Yeah, I think the day before you move them on.
Why?
And you're fine. I know. I thought that too. The only reason...
We had this whole conversation back when the Kessler contract was being rumored of going to Vegas, and how that... We had Vegas fans yelling on us like, "Oh, why would we trade for that? We have to be cap compliant with it," or something. Like, yeah, I don't know where I got that from. I don't know. They still got to do something, no matter what. You can't go into the season with no goaltender.
For sure.
So, and you're not getting Gibson without giving up significant pieces. So they really are, I think, stuck into Varlamov. I think that's probably the option that ends up working out for them. Because the Islanders' starting goaltender is Sorokin, 100%. There's no question about it.
Good Lord. They should trade for Shesterkin. That would be so funny.
Yeah, that's not happening.
I think Corey Crawford wants to come out of retirement.
Absolutely not. I haven't heard a word about that guy since he retired. He's probably out there living his best life somewhere.
Yeah, dude, he's so fucking happy to not have to be dealing with that shit anymore. He was like, I was one of the best players on this team, and you guys shit on me every chance you got. Fuck this place. I'm out.
He's probably enjoying it right now. He got out early.
Respect. King. All right, we got to get out of here. What are we at? 2 hours and 2.5 hours?
Yeah, we made it over 2 hours. Told you we had to stay on brand, so that's
baby.
how it is. But yeah, we're going to put the poll out so you guys can vote on what division we're going to cover and then what team we're going to cover first. We're going to hit each division and one team from each division. But obviously we'll start with whatever division you get watched. We're going to get Pacific and Anaheim right off the bat. Actually, that's not part of it because we have
Anaheim is not.
We have a season preview obviously that we're going to get to, and we're eventually going to do a deep dive in Anaheim. We do a deep dive on the Ducks every show. When we get to Pacific, the Ducks are not going to be part of it. So if you're going to be voting for a Pacific Division team, it'll be everybody but Anaheim. So that because that would be the troll move. 100% would be for everybody to vote for Anaheim.
Hey, remember when Chicago signed Andreas Athanasiou and Max Domi to 1 year, $3 million deals? What a weird season. This season is going to be so fucking weird. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
This is going to be awesome.
This
is going to be a tire fire.
Man, they're going to make us do a deep dive on the Kings, aren't they? I won't show up for that day. I'll pull in.
Just make me do it by myself.
Yeah, you and Jay can do the Kings one.
Yeah, because he's so much better for the Kings than you.
Yeah, I don't want to do that one. Please don't pick the Kings for us. I'll talk about any other Pacific Division team, or maybe the Sharks. Like, imagine a deep dive on how the Sharks are gonna do this year.
Guys, what if we just asked you not to pick the Pacific Division?
Please. I will rig the vote if you pick San Jose or LA. It's not happening. But yeah, if you're listening to this and you want to participate in the poll, it's going to likely exist on Twitter. I'll make an attempt to put it on our Facebook and Instagram. I know I can do it on Instagram in the story. I'm not sure I can do it on Facebook. It might be like a comment your division type thing. So if you want to vote on it, then check. If you're on Twitter, check Twitter first. If not, then check our Instagram and our Facebook just to see if it's up there. But yeah, I more than likely it's going to exist on Twitter and Twitter only, but we'll see what we can do on that day. I think it depends on how many votes we're getting on Twitter if we'll push it.
And we'll leave it open for longer than a day this time. We'll probably leave it open for 2.5 days, something like that. Give people time to get to it. We know you guys are busy and you have other shit to do than entertain our nonsense. So
yeah. So we'll put that out there. Stay tuned for that, and we'll be back. That's probably the next shows I think we'll be back with. I know we have a show scheduled we have a few guests that we were aiming to get on at some point here. Just to cover some different topics around the Ducks, so we're working on that, and those might be sprinkled in through. There are no set times on those, but probably sometime by the end of the month or early September to get those on, and then we're gonna start getting back into the season again. I feel like the summer went by super quick.
It did,
but it's
insane.
the late free agency period. 2 weeks later, I think, than normal. It made things hang around a little bit longer. There was no dead days in August yet. I think we're finally getting to those now. But the Kadri situation is drawn out so much that there's always been like one thing to hang on to here. And the Klingberg signing was just a couple weeks ago. So we're getting to the dog days.
Even that long?
Well, yeah. Now you've got World Juniors, right? So it's like hockey in August that you normally don't have. So it's been a nice summer to cover hockey. Not our typical boring off seasons. We've had a lot of stuff to do, but. Anyway,
what a dumb sport.
We're rambling, drawing the show on, trying to get to our 3 hours here. But appreciate everybody who came out live, anybody listening after the fact. We've got more stuff on the way, hoping to get the boys back on the show soon. I know we've got plans for the season to have everybody back and running it full time again and splitting up the shows so you can hear a couple different voices other than just me and Steven all the time. So that's the plan. We'll hope that it works out. But appreciate everybody.
We love and appreciate you all.
And bye. See you guys.
Bye.